Start the show and the camera falls over. What's the timing of that? Joshua Kimmich is the man in focus. A disappointment in the FA Youth Cup and more to do with our sporting director position. This is the Arsenal News Show. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys and girls for another episode of what is our Arsenal News Show. Joining you every single morning at 8 a.m, kind of every single day. Hope you're doing good. I hope you're doing well. Thank you as always for tuning in. Good morning to Black Shine, Matt G, Rich, Stevie. We've got Stephen, Amira, Paul, Ronald, Gooner76, NSW, Grantley Poos, Barry Arasilki, Tom, Simple Unity, Knowledge, Paul Jr., Maximius, Carlton, Lloyd, and plenty more of you guys and girls as well. Thank you as always for tuning in. Very much appreciate your time. Let's jump into today's stories. Make sure if you haven't done so already, drop a like, of course, on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you're new around here, with those notifications turned on so you never miss a show. We start with the disappointment of last night. There really was there was a massive hope that Arsenal, as the game ticked towards its end, might pull off a real surprise in the FA Youth Cup. It was never thought that Arsenal would be able to knock out Manchester United in the FA Youth Cup. They're second in the Northern Division of the Under-18s Premier League. Arsenal are around mid-table in the Southern Division of the Under-18s Premier League. But there was a small little hope that being at the Emirates and having the likes of Max Dowman back in the group would help in some way. But sadly, it was not to be. And as Arsenal edged towards 90 minutes with a 2-1 lead, an amazing strike from Man United's right back managed to get them back on level terms. And then they went ahead in extra time, and then Sweet got sent off as well for a terrible challenge. This is 100% a red card, but it was one of those that had to be made to deny a goal-scoring opportunity. Arsenal go out of the FA Youth Cup at the quarterfinal stage, but an amazing effort. Max Dowman was, without a doubt, the standout player on the night, and scored a penalty, won the penalty as well with an amazing run. Could have potentially even won it right at the end. Another really good run into the box, and struck, sadly, toward the Man United goalkeeper, just not far enough away from him that would stop him from finishing. But you can see why there is such a clamour and excitement about Max Dowman, about him playing in the senior sides whenever that will happen, perhaps next season, perhaps in pre-season. But it was a very disappointing but encouraging and really good game, actually. I think it showcased a lot of the Arsenal talent that they've got. You have to look at the average age of both teams. Man United's average age is bigger than Arsenal's, and a lot of Arsenal's older players for that age bracket are already playing in the under-21 setup. And so for that reason, it was a frustration, but I think in the end, probably what people expected. But great effort. Adam Birchall's done a very good job with these young guns, and they've got some big futures ahead of them. That is for sure. Moving forward, though, and into the sporting director news. And Tomas Rosicky, he has returned to the Arsenal frame once again. I reported previously that while indeed he was in contention to be Arsenal's kind of sporting director, he wasn't the front runner as had previously been suggested. And he's actually come out to explain the situation, actually, in speaking to the Live Sport Daily podcast, in which he said, so the reality is simple. My connection with Arsenal is natural because I spent 10 years there. And when you spend 10 years somewhere, you form a strong, very strong bond. So I have this strong bond with Arsenal, and I have a strong bond with Sparta Prague. These are the two clubs that I love football-wise because I have a warm relationship with them. I am honoured by the fact that I am even being considered by Arsenal's management, but I can say that I don't have any offer to go to Arsenal. As I mentioned before, I'm aware that I'm on the radar, or I figure in their considerations in some capacity, but I haven't received any offer at this point in time. So, yeah, it's as I expected, it's as I reported, where he is indeed somebody that is in consideration, as he says, but is not somebody that is leading the pack right now when it comes to potentially taking over that position. We know that there are some others that are perhaps more front runners. We know that Roberto Alabe is one of those. We know that Andrea Berta is one of those as well. So there is a number of has a number of candidates that could indeed be in that position, but we will wait and see moving forwards if indeed that turns out to be the case. And with, of course, March in our minds, in the present, it is the 1st of March today. It is this month where David Ornstein, of course, has already reported that a final decision, will be made on the sporting director. So that is certainly an expectation that we will see a decision finally come to its conclusion. Moving into some transfer news, a little bit, perhaps even more transfer news today than we've seen in some of the days we did in January, to be honest. But Barcelona are said to be keen on Arsenal transfer target Joan Garcia. The Espanyol goalkeeper, of course, is a player that Arsenal have followed and appreciate for quite a long time. They decided against moving for him at the end of the summer transfer window because Espanyol demanded a much higher price than they were willing to pay at that time. I imagine Espanyol, after another very good season so far from Joan Garcia, that they would again be looking to try and maximise any potential financial benefit from this deal. So yes, there is an expectation that Arsenal will look to try and sign Joan Garcia, but at this point in time, there is other clubs now in the frame, other clubs that are keen on Garcia. Isn't it interesting that as soon as you see other clubs linked with a player, that what happens is that suddenly his stock, how he's appreciated, how he's talked about, changes. As soon as another club come in for a player that you like, all of a sudden you want them more. It's a really strange reality, but that is, I see how some people are reacting online. It's how can we let Barcelona go? And we are cursed when it comes to our transfer targets, and it's just funny that how that works out. But that is the transfer game. And sticking with the transfer game, our headline story of the day is, according to Florian Pletterberg of Sky Germany, Arsenal are very keen on signing Joshua Kimmich on a free transfer at the end of the current season. The 30-year-old Bayern Munich versatile defender and midfielder is coming to the end of his current contract with Bayern Munich and is expected to make a decision on his future. Reporting the story yesterday, Arsenal are one of the clubs that have been concrete in their interest with Joshua Kimmich and have held talks. The Gunners would like to sign him on a free transfer on a possible replacement for Jorginho. Kimmich now has received 2 written offers from abroad, one from the Premier League. That's the main reason why he's hesitating to sign a new deal with Bayern, at least until 2028, and a salary of 20 to 22 million euros across the year. So that's about, what is that? I mean, what it would be 52 weeks in a year. So if it was 100, if it was 10 million, it'd be 200 grand a week. So, whoa, that's a lot. That's like well over £350,000 a week, maybe. If indeed is that right? I feel like I need to do a calculation. 20 million euros over 52 weeks. I feel like that's close to 400 million euros. 20 million divided by 52. Yeah, 384 million. So we convert that euros into... I mean, he is 30 years old and he is at Bayern Munich, which they're all on massive, massive contracts. 384. So, yeah, about £300,000 per week, £316,000 per week is what it would cost in terms of wages. It would be a free transfer, so obviously all players on those free transfers cost a lot. Arsenal are removing a lot of money off their wage bill with Jorginho and Tierney and Partey, Fabio Vieira, Lokonga, Tavares, potentially Kvyat, Zinchenko. A lot of these players are, of course, leaving, that opens up a lot of room in terms of wages, but a big chunk would go towards signing Joshua Kimmich. From a personal perspective, I've said this for a long, long time, and that's that Kimmich, for me, makes a lot of sense when it comes to just the profile. The wages are definitely something that give me pause for thought, that is for sure. But just on the player, I've been saying this, I know Clive knows that I've been saying this for a long time. If we are to lose both Jorginho and Partey, if Arsenal were to bring in Zubimendi and Kimmich during this summer window, it would be a really good bit of business in terms of replacing them. Not only that, but of course, Kimmich can play at right back, which means that if Ben White or Timber are not available for whatever reason, you've got another player that can operate more effectively, far more effectively than Thomas Partey can at right back. So the move itself, the profile itself, makes a lot of sense. But the money-wise, in terms of wages, although it would be a free transfer, which of course would help to pay for the deal, that is a bit of a stumbling block, perhaps, for me. I'm not sure I'd go as high as over £300,000 per week, but that is what he would cost, because that's what, Bayern players are paid huge sums of money at Bayern. So it would take a lot of money to convince him, I think, to join Arsenal. Maybe you want a new challenge, maybe he'd accept less. I guess we will have to wait and see. But Joshua Kimmich is indeed on Arsenal's radar, according to Florian Pletterberg of Sky. And we will await a decision on the player's future, I imagine, very soon. It could be that Arsenal being linked is in some way a ploy by the agents trying to help push a deal through for Bayern. That is definitely a possibility, but we'll see if that changes. Right, let's go to part 2 and your questions and more right after this. Okay, this is part 2 of the show where we tackle some of your questions and more. If you'd like to throw them into the chat box, now is indeed the time to do that. So get throwing them into the chat box as quick as you can. Just to give you a little bit of brief background on Joshua Kimmich in terms of kind of the level that he's producing right now. If you just have a quick glance at your screen and we go to his FBref page, you can have a look at some of what he's doing. So in comparison to midfielders right now, he's very progressive. He's quite a progressive deep line midfielder. When you look at in terms of fullbacks, it's just the defensive side of his game, of course, that he ranks lower in, which is interesting considering the position that he plays. You have a look at all of these stats in terms of progression, creativity, passing, progressive carries. He ranks really, really well. But when it comes to kind of the defensive side, you've got these lower statistics. Now, of course, playing for Bayern Munich, you do dominate the majority of the games that you play. So there's context to these stats. You aren't necessarily being able to put in the same number of defensive numbers as you are, say, a team that are battling down the bottom end of the table. So I guess you could argue that that is a reason for those lower numbers. And the same point, you could argue that when you're playing for a side like Bayern Munich as a midfielder or a fullback, you get the opportunity to progress the ball a lot more and be in possession a lot more than your opposition and your opponent. So I guess there is context to consider with both ends of the spectrum when it comes to this. But Joshua Kimmich, as we know, come up against Arsenal before, scored against Arsenal, you remember, in that Champions League quarter-final last season, has been considered one of Europe's best versatile defensive players that progresses the ball very, very well and has been known to be that player for many, many years now. A very big leader, experienced in winning things. You couldn't take away all of those accolades from him, that is for sure. So, yeah, his injury records. I should have a quick look at his injury record. It's always worth a look. Because I know he has suffered with injuries in the past. Let's have a quick check on those injuries. Injury history. This season, he missed one game. Last season, through injury, he missed 2 games. The season before that, he didn't miss any games through injury. The season before that, he missed a handful of games. The season before that is when he did a bit of a knee injury. He missed 13 matches, but came back. That's the biggest stint he's ever had out, is just those 13 games back 5 years ago now. So he actually has a very good injury record as well, which I think is also a big benefit to Arsenal if they were to move. Right, let's go to some questions, shall we, in the chat box. North London Forever says, Tom, on a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you that we will sign either Isak, Gyökeres or Osimhen in the summer? About a 2? 2 out of 10 on those 3? I'd be surprised if one of those 3 arrived at Arsenal in the summer. If you said Sesko, I'd say like a 7 or an 8. But one of those 3, I'd go with a 2. Personally. Olimine says, you can't sell Vieira and not bring another attacking midfielder in. It means that we have not learned our lesson. Absolutely. And that's why I absolutely would like to see Arsenal move for an attacking player on top of the striker as well. Walter says, getting a 30-year-old Kimmich to replace a 31-year-old Partey seems... I mean, it's not that, though, is it? I mean, it's Kimmich's replacing Jorginho. Zubimendi, 26-year-old Zubimendi, is replacing Partey. So that's what Arsenal are doing. Kimmich is just replacing that depth experience that we lose in Jorginho. Andy says there are loads of free agents, for example, each year we can be resourceful. All I can see is that this is high in terms of a midfielder that would cost 30 to 50 million. It could be low in that regard. Raj says Kimmich and Zubimendi would represent an incredible addition for Partey and Jorginho. Would be amazing upgrades. Amira says I'd ask about his injury record, but we all know that doesn't matter once you come to Arsenal. Absolutely. Raj also says Arsenal could have been proven right to wait for the most lucrative free agent market this summer. I mean, we'll wait and see if they actually do it. It's all words right now. We've actually got to go and do it. That's it's all well and good saying it and talking about it. It's another thing actually going out and doing it. Thomas says, why can't we buy that caliber in their prime, not just 5 years too late? Well, I guess that's why Arsenal are moving for Zubimendi, Tom. Player in his prime. That's why I talk about Eze. These are players in their prime that I'd like to see Arsenal move for. And certainly Zubimendi is a player they're moving for in their prime as well. Kimmich still very much has not dipped. His form hasn't dipped. I mean, look at a player like Mohamed Salah, in his 30s now, and the level he's producing. Some players do not drop off just because they hit 30. Ronald says, are we favourites to sign Sverenipan? We've not really heard anything about Sverenipan since January. He's a player, of course, that Arsenal were very keen on. He actually visited Arsenal in the January window, decided instead to wait until the summer to make a final decision on his future and play out the rest of this current campaign. So I don't know if we're favourites. Certainly there are a number of clubs interested in him. We know that Man City are suggested to be the City Football Group, in terms of Girona are interested in Sverenipan, but I did hear it was more Girona than CFG that were interested actually in signing the Norwegian youth international, now full international. Raj says, how many impressive was Max Dowman against United? He's an incredible talent that will take minutes next season. It seems like that is the pathway that we can see at the moment being forged for Max Dowman. Very much seems to be in that kind of bracket. Nick says, do you think there could be more accountability from all club ownerships, like a monthly press conference, for example? I doubt it, Nick. I mean, no other clubs do that. I don't see that happening. I just don't see it happening. Obviously, we'd all love more communication. We'd all love more clarity, more openness about what's going on. Of course we would. But it's just not something I can see happening right now. It's just unfortunately not something that I think there is much of a chance of happening. Thomas says, Nipan is going somewhere in the summer. I have my favourites, was a quote he had in the paper. Apparently he's a big Man United fan, says Soup. Hope he's professional. Aop says, Kimmich and Zubimendi, these strong links always seem to come after a really trying period of time. To be honest, I think at any point in the whole year, we see really big links to players with Arsenal. It's not just after trying periods. I know what you mean. It's certainly time-wise, it feels that way. But to be honest, we get links to players throughout the entire year that are always quite big, and naturally there's always going to be times where it's lower and times where it's better. But yeah, Byron says Kimmich for 2 years at 30 years of old and 300 grand a week to replace Jorginho. Agreed, but if we lose Partey as well, who else do we get? Zubimendi, obviously. That is the player that obviously we're looking at the moment. Nick says, do you think Kimmich would play first team every single week or be a bit of a routine player? Obviously, he's a great DM. I think he would play a lot. Yeah, I do. I think that he would get the opportunity to play. Obviously, we've got the ability to rotate. You can play right back, you can play CDM, you can play 8, you can play even centre back in desperate situations. So you wouldn't want to with his height, but certainly he is incredibly versatile. Can play left back as well, I think, in trying times as well. So yeah, I'll have a quick look on Transfermarkt to see all of the positions he has ever played. Centre backs, DM, centre mid, right midfield, right back. He's played 541 games across all levels with 43,000 minutes under his belt, 55 goals and 130 assists. That's amazing, really. The number of goals and assists he has is amazing for a player who plays in the position that he's in. He's averaging a goal once every 10 games. He's averaging assists better than one every 2 games. So you're getting a goal or an assist basically once every 3 or 4 matches from a defensive player. That's an incredible return across the course of his career. Very, very impressive as well. Kabiri says Rice plays better as a 6 than an 8. Arteta keeps playing our players out of position. I mean, this isn't entirely true. I mean, Rice is having a little bit of a downturn in form recently. if you actually have a look at some of the numbers we discussed in recent, the data suggests that Rice plays very well in both of those positions. I thought that Rice's future was very much at 6. It seems that his future will lie more so in the 8 role, but he's one of the best progressors of the ball in terms of European elite clubs and elite players. He ranks among the best progressors of the ball. He's just having a bit of an off season. To be honest, all of our players are having a bit of an off season, it seems. It's a really difficult campaign to have much analysis on what's going on. I think Rice can play both positions. I think the number 8 position of his gets a little bit overlooked, and actually the data that come out suggests that he actually plays pretty darn well in that role. We're just lacking those players further up the field to be those focal points for players that are having more transitional influence on the team. Brendan says, Tom, with the Premier League and UEFA restrictions, what is a realistic summer budget for Arsenal? Do we need to look at selling some of the starting players if we're to find big signings? I don't know what the amount of money there is for Arsenal to spend. Nobody ever does. It's never something, when you see those war chests articles, no one knows how much Arsenal have to spend. It's not information that Arsenal ever give out. I've said before, I think I wrote a piece the other day about if people were expecting Arsenal to spend well over £200 million, I think they were going to be very disappointed. I think we may have to sell one of our forward players like a Martinelli or a Trossard to open up potential avenues for more investment in the attacking line, which could be possible because we know there is interest from particularly Saudi Arabia in those. So I think that you're looking at a summer spend between 1 and 200 million is what I'd be looking at. But that could change depending on what players are sold. But I don't know, really. Amira says, have you heard of this kid, Mika Biereth? His name has been everywhere recently. I think it's worth looking at as a young striker to invest in. So he has done absolutely brilliantly since moving to Monaco. His numbers have been really, really, really strong. In his first 7 Liga games, he has 10 goals. He has 3 hat-tricks in that time since moving to Monaco. He scored a hat-trick against Auxerre. He scored in a 4-2 win. He scored a hat-trick against Nantes in a 7-1 win. And he just scored a hat-trick against Stade Reims, who, of course, is following Balogun's former side, who was on loan at from Arsenal. 3 goals in a 3-0 win there. He also scored in a 3-2 win against Stade Reims to get that 10th goal. It's been very impressive. Very, very impressive. And to be honest, it's not as if there was much of a sign that this was going to be the case. When he went on loan to RKC Waalwijk, he had that injury. It didn't really work out for him. He then went on loan to Sturm Graz in the second half of the 23-4 season? I think it was. He went on loan to Sturm Graz and he got 5 goals and 3 assists in 15 games for the top club in the Austrian league, and they were better than Red Bull Salzburg that season. In the Scottish Premiership, he got 6 goals and 5 assists in 14 games. Like, these are good numbers, but they didn't suggest numbers like he's getting for Monaco in one of the top 5 leagues in Europe, of course. Yes, those goals have come against some sides that aren't doing particularly great in Liga, but it's still a very impressive number. And like, we look at that and we say, oh, Arsenal are wrong to sell Balogun. Well, Balogun's now been pushed out, of the team really by Mika Biereth. He has suffered with injuries this season. He's currently out at the moment with a shoulder injury. It's not necessarily been a move that it's just not necessarily been a move that's been too successful. Last season, he had 7 goals in 29 games as their kind of lead centre forward with Yacine Ben Yedder. So, and now he's got a major injury that he's been missing for the majority of this season. So that's why they actually went and signed Mika Biereth. But it's really easy to obviously look back and go, oh, well, we shouldn't have let this guy go. But no one was saying it like when he left for Sturm Graz. Arsenal got a record fee in terms of what Sturm Graz paid for the player. They had a very good sell-on clause, which they got obviously money from when Monaco signed him from Sturm Graz. They got around £7 million, I think £6 to £7 million for Mika Biereth in the end with add-ons and everything else. So he's doing really well, but he wasn't ever going to get anywhere near Arsenal when we were challenging for those titles in the last 2 seasons. It wasn't going to happen, was it? So I think we have to be sensible when discussing kind of the hindsight element to Mika Biereth's rise and kind of his numbers. Slisa says, Tom, where do we go from here? Can we expect anything different from the upcoming games in the current state? I hope so, but I just don't know where that extra oomph is going to come from. I really don't know where it's going to come from. It's very difficult to see much of what Arsenal are going to be able to do in these coming weeks. Byron says there is something about the state. What? Something Stade Louis. I don't know. That brings the best out of players, it seems, Tom. Oh, maybe the Stade Rennais. Is that what you're talking about, Byron? I haven't got a clue what you're talking about, to be honest, mate. Andy says, Kivior, Vieira, Zinchenko are likely to be in the shopping window. If Sesko and Zubamendi or Plan B players come in, the rest will be very cheap signings. RRDM says, Kimmich is a free transfer, which is a key factor. It's cheap because he'll be joining as a free agent, similar to extending Partey's contract. We should consider wages with context in mind. Lee says, Tom, Arteta told us not to be satisfied with second place at the end of last season. What do you expect him to say in May? Probably something similar, to be honest. Of course, he didn't know when he said those words that we were going to deal with what we've dealt with this season. And I think that he is obviously not satisfied. We're not satisfied with second place either. I don't think the players are satisfied with second place. And certainly they've not been a team that strikes me as a team that are satisfied. I mean, when it comes to those behind Arteta and the recruiters in January, maybe they were satisfied. But certainly Arteta, the players, I don't get that sense from them, but I imagine the messaging will be quite similar, to be honest. Stade Louis II is Monaco. Okay, there you go. That's their name. Okay, I'd absolutely no. It didn't click in my mind at all. That's what you were talking about. Is it something about that stadium that brings the best out of players? Maybe. I mean, it's pretty good when they play against Arsenal in that stadium from our Champions League memories, isn't it? Chino says, Tom, if we need to make a major sale this summer, who do you think should go? I personally think it should be either Trossard or Martinelli. I agree. It would probably be one of those two that would be the major sale. New Music says we've let so many attackers go in recent years. Now look, I mean, yeah, but these attackers that we've let go, I mean, no one was crying their eyes out other than Balogun, who hasn't really done anything since leaving. So Arsenal have made some really good deals. I mean, they got more than 30 million for Balogun, including add-ons. They got 30 million for Nketiah. Like they got more than 30 million for Smith Rowe. Like you got nearly 100 million quid off those three players who, yes, right now we could do with the injuries that we have got. But if we didn't have the injuries that have been horrendous for our forward line, then we wouldn't even be thinking about it. And we'd have an extra 100 million on the books, which is what we need to use to reinvest. We need that money to be able to reinvest in the future. It's not a case of like penny pinching or selling for the sake of selling. We absolutely had to bring money in, especially for Hale End graduates who it's really good on Arsenal's books to get that money through the door. Thank you so much, Carl, for the very kind donation. Really appreciate that, mate. Dropping in a $20 donation there. Good morning, Tom, from Carl Loomis. Checking in from the United States. Love the podcast. Thank you for keeping us all grounded during this rough patch. Hoping the boys can turn it around soon. Thank you, Carl. Very much appreciate your kind words and your kind donation to the channel. Stuff like that helps us do what we do here. And thank you so much for listening. Another example of our global listenership as well. I had a brilliant conversation with one of the listeners at our live event who come all the way from New York to watch the West Ham game. I kind of feel for him now. Coming all that way to watch what we saw against that game against West Ham. And he spoke about kind of the appreciation of how we are as a community here for our global listenership and the fact that we value very much our global audience as much as anybody living 5 minutes from the Emirates Stadium. And it's really important to do that, I think. G said Force says, if we sell Martinelli and keep Trossard, then we're going to need to replace him in the following year. Keep Martinelli and sell Trossard. Answer says, I saw his brilliance from when he was in the Scottish League, Tom. I always thought he would be given a chance. I mean, we were competing for the title answer in the Premier League. It's very different. It's never going to happen. Soup says, to be fair, when we were selling the likes of Balogun and Biereth, we were desperate to improve our selling record as well. It's a good point. Ronald says, would you look to sign Lookman? Where would he play as a second striker in his main position over the wing? I think that Lookman's the type of player that you bring in if one of Trossard or Martinelli leaves. That's who you sign if one of those two end up going. Peter says, thoughts? People saying Arsenal are the biggest failures this year, even compared to other teams like Man City. Yeah, I did see. I think it was Jamie O'Hara put a tweet out. Let me see if I can find the tweet that quoted it. It was brilliant. Yeah, Peter Leonard on Twitter quoted Jamie O'Hara, said the biggest disappointments this season was Arsenal. Peter's tweet: Spurs have dropped from 5th to 13th place. Manchester United from 8th to 14th. City from 1st to 4th. Villa from 4th to 10th. West Ham from 9th to 15th. But it's Arsenal that have gone from the mighty second place to the second place to second place that are the biggest disappointment. What does this nonsense come from? I thought it was a very good tweet. I didn't retweet it because I don't really want to give too much energy to Jamie O'Hara. But I thought it was an excellent tweet. Certainly one that was one that resonated, I think, a lot. Byron says, do you see Vieira leaving? I think keeping him as a bench option alongside Max Dowman next season. I think we should just sell him, Byron, to be honest. I really do. Yes, bring somebody in, maybe promote from within in terms of Max, but I think you got to sell Vieira. Make the money while you can make it. Brog says Kimmich's crossing is absolutely insane for sure. You can put it on a penny. Andy says, I'm just hoping that we beat PSV and nail down a UCL spot for next year. I fear much more is just not realistic as much as you never ever know, of course, for sure. Amira says, don't think any of us was desperate to keep him, but we were more surprised that we let him go without giving him a chance in pre-season. Guess being a starter on loan made him want to continue being one. I think that's probably fair. Fuad says, going to my first women's game at Meadow Park tomorrow, Tom. Looking forward to supporting the girls. I hope you have a fantastic time, mate. Of course, seeing so many people support not just the youth side, but also the women's team as well. It's been the international break recently for the women's team, but they are back in action on Sunday at 5:30 against West Ham United. So make sure if you are able to get down to the Emirates, down to Meadow Park, make sure you do get hold of some tickets. Surprised, actually, there's not. Is it because the Youth Cup game was yesterday? I'm surprised it wasn't on. I guess they didn't prepare for it to be a weekend that would be no men's football, I guess, because the FA Cup is this weekend. And he says, ask yourself, do someone that loves one of United, Chelsea, Spurs or City ever like anything Arsenal related, or do you think they will spread propaganda or at least have negative takes? I mean, weirdly, there's some Arsenal fans, Andy, out there that spread negative propaganda against Arsenal. So I don't know, mate. It's anyone's capable of it. Anyone at all. Soup says they don't call them talk whatever for no reason. Front Yard says, sorry if you missed it. Have you talked about Mika Bireth? Yes, Front Yard. I think it's all we've been talking about for the last 10 minutes. Elise says, Asensio firing again. Did we miss a bit of a trick there? I think that the Asensio one as a loan would have been far better than not doing anything, wouldn't it? I think it would have been a lot better than not doing anything at all. Aston Villa won last night, Asensio scoring twice as they beat Cardiff City to move to the 5th round of the FA Cup. I'll run you through some of the games that are going on today. The 4th round of the FA Cup. Man United, it's Crystal Palace against Millwall, Preston against Burnley, Bournemouth against Wolves, Man City played Plymouth, who knocked out Liverpool, of course. They are away from home, though, this time. Newcastle against Brighton tomorrow, Man United against Fulham tomorrow, and Nottingham Forest against Ipswich on Monday. They are the 5th round fixtures. So Aston Villa into the quarterfinals of the FA Cup. Got a real chance of a trophy there potentially this season, Aston Villa. If indeed, with Liverpool out, Arsenal out, Chelsea out, Man City, Newcastle, Nottingham Forest, Bournemouth, Fulham. You're looking at them as potentially having real opportunities. Crystal Palace even to get far in this competition without some of the big sides. No Spurs, of course, either. In those competitions. Joel says, guys, another smokescreen. Let's not fall for this. We are not getting either of them. Wake up. Let's vote with our wallet this ongoing season. It's so funny, isn't it? Like the whole protest or vote. Arsenal finished in 2nd place the last 3 seasons. You speak to any other team that's not Man City or Liverpool, and they're saying, "Oh, vote with your wallet." Oh, I wouldn't want. I was listening to Potsy and Judges yesterday saying, they were speaking to their mates of other clubs, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we'd hate to have Mikel Arteta as our manager." It's like, what a load of rubbish! What a load of absolute tosh! Rival clubs would be buzzing if Mikel Arteta left Arsenal. They would be absolutely buzzing if he left, because they aren't going to bring in a better coach than him in the immediate term. That is for sure. And Mikel Arteta is far better than any of the other coaches of our rival clubs. You know, Liverpool and City aside right now, They wouldn't take Arteta at any of their clubs. Are you joking? Are you having a? I nearly saw that. Are you having a laugh? Like, it's so funny, the lies. It's just so much BS. Like, I don't doubt that that's what they've been told by their mates, but their mates are lying through their teeth. It's embarrassing. It's so funny. Dan says, hi, Tom. Why is it that most teams who come from relegation for the last couple of years go back down? It's really hard. The step up from the Championship to the Premier League is really difficult. You also get a lot of money when you go back down through parachute payments. I'm not suggesting that clubs want to go back down, but the level is just so different now between the Championship and the teams in the Premier League. Like, even clubs that have established themselves more recently, like Bournemouth and Fulham and Nottingham Forest, these teams that have come, Brentford, that have established themselves in the Premier League now, it seems that kind of gap has kind of gone. And so teams that are coming up from the bottom, your Ipswich, your Leicester, Southampton, are going to go straight back down this season. W. Mozart says, why do you put everything into context except the fact that we failed to win the league instead of coming second so many times, 21 years now? I mean, I don't really get the comment. If you look back at the last 3 seasons, Arsenal obviously were the favourites for any of them. And this season, when we were looking to build on from last season, what we have had to deal with is just utterly mad, utterly mental. From everything that's out of our control has been nuts. What's within our control, particularly the transfer window, was also, a colossal failure. But I don't really get the comment, to be honest, mate. I don't, because it's so obvious that what we've done in the last 3 seasons, and still the fact that we're even second this season with what we've dealt with, I still think is nuts. Whether we finish second is another thing, of course. If Arsenal were to finish second this season, I'd be shaking my head and thinking, wow, I can't believe they've managed to still finish second after everything that's happened. So I guess we'll have to wait and see. Leandro says, imagine letting a Mikel Arteta go, who now has 5 years of managerial experience at the top and is one of the top 10 managers in the world and destined to win at the elite level. I know, mate, but some people just don't like the guy. And he says, he still looks a bit rough, although from what I read, he has done quite well when training with the first team, but 2 years from now, it might be beautiful. That was in response to Nick's question about Dowman, who says, we'll be 15 until the end of December. Do you think he's ready to play men's football in the early rounds of the Cup, potentially? It's difficult speaking about somebody so young. All I can say to you is that he's exceptionally highly rated and that there are a lot of people at Arsenal that do feel that there is a pathway. And certainly from asking Mikel Arteta myself about him, there's some real frustrations that they've not been able to give him that debut at senior level, I think, already. So just watch this space. That's what's really important. Bilal, thank you so much for the kind donation. Hey, I'm just curious about people who say it's make or break next season if Mikel doesn't win the title. I just wonder, when is it ever make or break for the board? It's a good question. Like, when is the scenario where Arsenal, as kind of the higher-ups, could actually look at Arteta and think it's time to move on? I think all the while Arsenal are still very much established as a title contender, he will stay. And if they are in those competitions, if they are competing, even if he wasn't to win those trophies, I think that he would stay. Not that I think I agree with that necessarily. As I've said before, my position's been very clear. This contract for me, he has to win a title, a Premier League or a Champions League within this contract. I think is absolutely the expectation for Arteta. But otherwise, I feel that we've probably reached the ceiling under his management during the time that he would have been at the club. So from that point of view, I think that that's clear. But from the ownership point of view, whether he actually would ever go, as long as he's always competing, I just can't see them getting rid of him, because they will see that as probably good enough in their minds. And I disagree. I think you've got to have higher expectations than that. But that's what I think the club would be looking at. Dan says, hi, Tom. Don't think Kimmich signing will signal a trend that will emphasise on players that are watched from other clubs instead of going for our own young, talented players. I mean, I guess when you sign somebody that's like Kimmich, you're not blocking pathways, really, because they're only going to be at the club for like 2 years max. So you still open up that pathway for others and you get that immediate quality. And you can still bed in those young players as well, because injuries happen, and that opens up spaces in the squad, of course, as well. And he says, next year with a 9 and a new 6, if we're more than 6 points off the title and not winning more than the FA Cup, then he's probably gone. I think even then, I think he'd probably stay. If indeed we were still second or third in the league, I still don't see them getting rid of him. Xhaka, my captain, says, what do you mean the board? Don't the Cronkies have 100% control? They are the board. The board are the Cronkies. Like the board is Stan Kroenke, Josh Kroenke, Tim Lewis, Richard Garlick, James King, the chair. Who is it? That's somebody else who's really high up as well, who I've lost the memory of. But that's what they mean by the board. Amarugana says the owners have their agenda. I assume that was. Why would they change? Peter says, Tom, do you think it's ironic the season that we lose all of our strikers to injuries? Obi Martin would probably have got first team football. It's not lost on me, Peter. He certainly probably would have been playing. He's already getting some Premier League minutes at Man United this season because, well, their strikers they've got available are just simply so bad that they have to give a 16-year-old a chance rather than the 150 odd million they've spent on how many strikers they've brought in over the last couple of seasons. Bilal says, no, I was talking about the board. They've neglected the club once again. So I'm just wondering how long we have to put up with their nonsense. As I said, like in terms of fans, if Arsenal are competing for the title, again, I don't really know how you could ever get to a place of protesting. It would be incredibly arrogant, I think, to do that. If Arsenal were season on season in the title race competing, just missing out or whatever, or if Arsenal had these 3 seasons that they've had again, let's say Arsenal have the 3 seasons they've had again, they finish second for the next 3 seasons, right? Obviously there'll be frustration, and at the end of that Arteta contract, I'll be thinking he's probably taken us as far as he can take us. So if there is another manager that could take you that step further, I would be open to it. But the idea of protesting, it would really stink, I think, of entitlement. From a personal point of view, I think it would really stink of entitlement. I mean, talk to any fan of any club like that are anywhere else, they think you're protesting, like people in the streets, and you're challenging for the title every single season. It would be a bit weird, wouldn't it? It would be a bit strange. Let's go to Steve, who says, Tom, is that official? If Arsenal finish second, you will shave your head. Oh, yeah, that's what I'm saying. To be honest, after the last haircut I had, I almost felt like shaving my head. It was atrocious. And he says he has a big salary, so I think they'd only sack him if they really get a kind of a consensual parting. Otherwise, 50 million plus is probably not a cost KSC will want to carry over, but I fear fans' movement on this. Soup says, do you think that we'll see the true extent of the Kroenke's ambitions by the end of... this summer is huge for the owners. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, this summer is the conclusive summer on how you view the ownership, because you've had 3 seasons of finishing second or whatever happens. Hypothetically, let's say another second or third place this season. Then if you don't go into the summer and bring in the striker that Arteta wants, bring in the midfield that Arteta wants, replace other figureheads in the team and spend, around 200 million quid, in my view. If you don't do that, and you've not brought in and successfully the players that Arteta wants, then, without question, you can see the motivations. If they end up having a really meager window, it would be really awful. Because then, if Arsenal have a meager window, I don't think they'll compete for the title next season. I just can't see it. If they have a window like they had last summer, where they bring in 2 players who improve a bit, but not to the level that we need, I don't see Arsenal competing for the title next season. And that's when Arsenal start to regress. And that's when you can have conversations about being genuinely very unhappy with the vision of the people in charge. So that's when you could start seeing some quite dark feelings. So yeah, you're absolutely right, Sue. This summer window, forget the end of the season. It's just this summer. This summer is the biggest moment I think it's the biggest moment in their ownership of the club. Absolutely the biggest summer in their ownership of the club. Nick says, each ridiculous to even talk about corn through his head. What? If you look at where we were, I don't know. Is that a typo? I don't know. Is that a saying? Corn through someone's head? I don't know what that means. If you look at where we were, we've just been incredibly unfortunate circumstances. Yes, we could have done more in January. Here we go. Maybe this is it. Here it is. This is what Nick really meant. It's ridiculous to even talk about getting rid of Arteta. Look back at where we've come from. We've just had a very unfortunate season, but we could have done more in January. I think just Nick sums up where my position is. I think it's ridiculous to think about getting rid of Arteta. I think we've had a ridiculous season when it comes to bad luck and misfortune. But when it comes to January, the club failed. You could argue there was failures in the summer as well. I think I said it was a 6.5 out of 10 window. That was generous. In hindsight, it was a generous value. So there was failures in both windows because this January was a 0. 0 out of 10. So that is the summation for me. Nick's spot on there. That's where I'm at. Amaral Guinness says, Tom, while you've got podcast haters on Arteta, the owners get a free ride. While you've got podcast haters on Arteta, I guess Arteta takes a lot of he absorbs. It's a bit like Jupiter. He kind of like absorbs a lot of the flack and the a lot of what's going around, when actually the energy, I think, should be way more towards those making the decisions behind him. He can only focus on what he's got available to him and what's on the pitch. It's not his job to sign players. It's his job to inform on what he wants, but it's people behind him who are in charge in terms of getting those deals done. He's wanted players in the past that have not been delivered to him. It's a ridiculously long list of players that he has wanted, from players like Lisandro Martinez to players like Rafinha to players like Mudryk to players like Sesko to players like Isak. These are players that he's wanted. Vlahovic, you could argue, thrown there too. There's been loads of players that he's wanted. The club have been unable to get them, unable to deliver them. So he's dealing with what he's dealt with. He's dealing with the players he's been given, and with the players that people feel has not been good enough, or the business people feel has not been good enough, he's taken Arsenal into a title race. As I say always, you can't have it both ways. You can't complain about the quality of the squad. You can't complain about the quality of our signings and then complain that the manager's not good enough when he's taken a squad that you're widely and frivolously critical of and taking them into title races season after season after season. You can't have it both ways. It's just hypocrisy. So you can only have one or the other. You can't have it both. Anyway, we'll bring an end to the show there. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning in, people. Really appreciate your time, especially on a weekend. Make sure you drop a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you're new, and I'll be back with you tomorrow morning, bright and early, rise and shine, for another episode discussing everything that happens in the next 24 hours in the world of Arsenal as we look ahead to that game against PSV. Looking forward to that. Have a great day. Stay safe, stay well, stay happy and respectful, and as always, up the Arsenal.